I want to explain what I did next carefully, because I need you to understand it wasn't cruelty. It wasn't even revenge, exactly. It was precision. The kind of response to a situation as precisely constructed as Diane's deserved. My solicitor had already begun the process of freezing the accounts we could reach and building the legal case for recovery. That process was going to take time. Diane, meanwhile, had no indication that I knew anything. She was still at home, still making dinner on Tuesday nights, still asking about the business with that practiced, warm attention that I now understood was performance maintained purely to protect her timeline. She was waiting, I understood, for the right moment to deliver news she had rehearsed. I decided to give her a stage. With my solicitor's knowledge and under careful legal guidance, I allowed a particular piece of paperwork to cross Diane's path. It was a document she had been watching for evidence, as far as she was concerned, that a specific account restructure had been completed and that the final tranche of accessible funds had cleared. She had been waiting for this document for 2 months. It was, in her plan, the trigger, the moment that confirmed she had everything she needed. She had it on a Thursday. By Friday evening, she had called her solicitor. On Saturday morning, she sat across from me at our kitchen table and told me she wanted a divorce. I looked at her for a long moment. She held my gaze with the controlled steadiness of someone who has rehearsed this conversation many times. Her hands were folded on the table. Her voice was even. She was, I remember thinking, genuinely impressive. If I hadn't known what I knew, I might have believed I was watching a woman finally telling a difficult truth. I told her I understood. I told her I wasn't going to fight it. I told her I just needed a few days to process. She nodded. She reached across and touched my hand. She told me she was sorry. I smiled at her, and I let her believe, for the last time, that she was the only one in the room who knew what was really happening. The document she had received was real. The account restructure was real. What wasn't real was the balance. In the weeks prior, working quietly with Colin and with the full cooperation now of Margaret, we had moved every accessible asset out of the accounts Diane was watching and into a legal structure she had no visibility into. The money she believed she had secured was, in the most significant part, already gone. Not stolen, not hidden in the way she had hidden things, but legally restructured, documented, protected. The holding company she had created in my name, her solicitor discovered, 3 days into proceedings, that it had been formally dissolved and its assets transferred to a recovery trust my solicitor had established. The properties it held were already subject to a court order. Her legal position was not what she had believed it to be. Here is what I want you to understand about the weeks that followed. I didn't enjoy it. I want to be clear about that because I think the easy version of this story makes the moment of someone else's collapse feel like satisfaction. It didn't feel like that. It felt like standing in a house you built for 10 years and watching it burn. And the fact that someone else lit the match doesn't make the smoke smell any different. What I felt mostly was tired. The particular exhaustion of a man who has had to be more careful than he should ever have needed to be in a marriage that should have been the one place in his life where he didn't have to protect himself. But I also felt something else. Something cleaner than I expected. The funeral. I need to explain the funeral. Because I haven't explained it yet, and you've been patient. It was her idea, initially, or rather, it was the idea that her fiction made inevitable. When Margaret had told Diane's extended network about the illness, about the terminal diagnosis, she had done so convincingly enough that by the time Diane's plan began to unravel, a number of people in her life genuinely believed I was dying. Diane had never corrected them. She had allowed the fiction to breathe, to expand, to take root in the minds of people who sent concerned messages and offered quiet prayers. When the legal proceedings began and Diane understood the true position she was in, several of these people began to ask questions, not about me, about her, about why she had told them what she'd told them, about what exactly she had been doing with the information she'd asked them in small ways to carry. The funeral was my solicitor's idea, and I'll admit it when I say it that it was the kind of idea that only a very particular kind of legal mind produces. Not a real funeral, a gathering, a formal occasion, framed as a memorial for the marriage, in a sense, for the version of events Diane had constructed. My solicitor invited the relevant parties, including two of Diane's own family members who had unknowingly assisted in moving funds, to a formal meeting at which the full financial picture would be presented and statements would be taken. I wore a gray tie, the same one I'd worn to my grandfather's actual funeral, because it was the only non-black tie I owned that was formal enough, a small private detail that meant something only to me. I stood at the front of that room, and I watched Diane's face as document after document was placed on the table, as the accounts were laid out, as Margaret, sitting 3 seats away from her daughter and unable to meet her eyes, confirmed the conversations that had taken place, as the solicitor outlined the recovery position and the likely criminal referral. Diane didn't cry. I'll give her that. She sat with a stillness that I recognized, the same stillness I had sat with in my car on that February afternoon when Colin had called. The stillness of someone who has just understood the complete shape of the thing that is happening to them. At one point, she looked at me across the table. It was the first time all day that she had looked at me directly, and I held her gaze the same way she had held mine at the kitchen table, steadily, without expression, giving her nothing. There was a question in her eyes, a real one, beneath the legal proceedings and the formal language and the presence of 7 other people in the room. How long did you know? I didn't answer it. I didn't need to. The documents on the table were the answer. Diane's solicitor negotiated hard over the following months. Mine negotiated harder. The criminal referral, ultimately, was not pursued, a decision that wasn't mine alone to make, and one I still have complicated feelings about. What was recovered was substantial. Not everything, because some of it had moved through channels that made full recovery impractical, but enough to close a chapter with something that felt, if not like justice, then at least like accounting. The divorce was finalized on a gray Thursday afternoon in November. I signed the papers in Colin's office because my solicitor's office was being repainted, and I found the smell of fresh paint intolerable. Colin made tea. We sat for a while after it was done and didn't talk about it. He asked about a new contract I'd been working on. I told him about it. We drank our tea. The normal world continued to be normal in the way it does when extraordinary things have quietly ended. Margaret called me the following week. She wanted me to know that she hadn't known, that she had trusted her daughter entirely, and that trusting someone entirely, giving them your blind belief, your unquestioned confidence, the full weight of your faith, doesn't protect you from what they do with it. I told her I knew that. I told her I knew it very well. I want to end with something honest. Building a business teaches you a particular kind of lesson that nothing else quite replicates. It teaches you that the most dangerous threats to what you've built are never the loud ones. They're never the clients who shout, the partners who argue, the competitors who challenge you openly. The dangerous ones are quiet. The dangerous ones are close. The dangerous ones smile at you over breakfast and ask about your day and make you feel, in small daily increments, that the thing you built is safe. Diane was the best business opponent I ever faced. I mean that without irony. The patience she demonstrated, the precision of her planning, the discipline required to maintain a normal life on the surface while running a parallel operation underneath. It was extraordinary. If she had pointed that ability at something legitimate, she would have been formidable. Instead, she pointed at me. At 9 years of marriage. At a man who was too busy building things to notice the one person he decided not to watch. I notice more now. I think that's the truest thing I can tell you about who I am on the other side of it. I notice more. I trust more carefully. I give my confidence in smaller amounts, over longer periods, to people who earn it in verifiable ways. The business is still running. 3 new contracts this year. 15 employees became 22. I drink my coffee in the morning in an office where no one has access to accounts they haven't been formally authorized to touch, and I find that I sleep better than I have in years. I don't know where Diane is now. I don't look. Some doors, once they close, deserve to stay closed. But sometimes, not often, just sometimes, I think about that table, about the way she looked at me across it, about the question in her eyes that I chose not to answer. I've thought about what the answer would have been if I'd given it. It would have been this. I knew the same day you decided to stop being my wife and start being my problem. I knew the same moment you made the mistake that every careful person eventually makes. The moment you stopped wondering whether you were being watched. because you were so certain you weren't. I knew. I just needed you to believe otherwise long enough to finish. By the time she understood what she had walked into, I had already walked out,